Hello and welcome back to the preparation of our CTET examination. In this particular discussion, we will be talking about CTET paper 2 language के previous year questions, जो कि December 2024 के examination से हैं. We have two options when it comes to languages, both in paper 1 and paper 2. We have to give our preferences as to which one we want it to be as language 1 and which language we want as language 2. So in today's discussion, we will be focusing on English language as a preference for paper 1 and also a preference for paper 2 as your language 1 and 2 both. So this particular set that we will be solving today is from December 2024 paper 2 of languages. So usually हमारा ये जो question paper होता है इसमें languages के ऊपर टू टाइप्स के क्वेश्चंस आते हैं. एक होता है जो कि हमारा अनसीन पैसेजेस या पोम्स हो सकता है एंड दूसरा टाइप होता है पेडागोजी से रिलेटेड. सो हमारे लैंग्वेज पेडागोजी से रिलेटेड क्वेश्चंस आते हैं. तो ये आज के हमारे डिस्कशन में हम क्वेश्चंस रिलेटेड टू लैंग्वेज पेडागोजी को सॉल्व करेंगे. सो मूविंग ऑन इन दिस पर्टिकुलर सेशन, मैं हूँ अनामिका सिंह. आई एम अ सीनियर रिसर्च स्कॉलर फ्रॉम RI मैसूर. द फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन दैट वी हैव इन फ्रंट ऑफ अस इज authenticity of materials refers to. So whenever we say a particular material is authentic, it refers to what? Option 1, materials which children bring from home. Option 2, materials written by the teacher for her class. Option 3, materials written or developed by people in authority. And option 4, materials written or developed in real life content. So whenever we talk about authenticity of something, it has to be applicable in the real world as well. So the right answer here will be option 4, that is materials written or developed in the real life content, or it should have certain context and applications from the real life. So that is what is the correct answer here. Moving on to the next question. Aparna, a learner of class 5th, understands that listening involves listening to each sound, words, then sentences to get the meaning of the speech or an audio. Which approach or strategy she believes in for learning to listen? So Aparna is trying to understand and listen to each sound and then words and then sentences. So she is moving from the simplest to going up higher. So the correct answer here would be a bottom-up approach. That is the third option here. So whenever we are moving from simple examples and then coming to the rule, or we are trying to learn the sounds, the words, and then the sentences, it is referred to as bottom-up approach. The other approach is the top-down approach, wherein you know the complex rules and then you come to the specific examples. So these are some of the ways in which we learn the English language. So in this particular question, the right answer is option 3. Coming to the next question. What is systemic competence in language learning? So there is one concept of knowing what systemic competence is, and we need to understand that well here, because this question is repeated in the CTET examination in the same paper itself for language 1 and also English being the preference as language 2 as well. So let us look at the options here. Understanding that all humans have a system of many languages. Option 2, understanding and applying that language works as a system. Option 3, understanding and applying that languages have a grammatical system. And option 4, understanding that all languages have a common structural system. So when we are talking about systemic competence, we are talking about the foundation, the system in which the languages are being presented or how a language is learned. So to have the systemic competence would mean that we understand and we know how to use a particular language. So this particular competence is referred to as systemic competence, and the correct answer here would be understanding and applying that language works as a system. Moving on to the next question. Here is a text or some statements. Find out which language register does this text represent. So this question is on the concept of language register. Now let us look at the text given to us. The Indian Constitution recognizes every person as equal. This means that every individual in the country, including male and female, persons from all castes, religions, tribes, educational and economic background are recognized as equal. This is not to say that inequity ceases to exist. It doesn't. But at least in democratic India, the principle of the equality of all persons is recognized. So we have read this text now. We can understand that it is from a concept that is related to Indian Constitution. It is talking about equality of opportunities and how there should be no unfair treatment of people based on the varied backgrounds that they are from. Now let us look at the 4 options in front of us. The first is scientific register. Second, politic register. Option 3, social science register. And option 4, a legal register. Even though it is talking about Indian Constitution, if you see the key words or the major ideas are actually related to the social sciences. So the correct answer here would be the social science register. What this means here is you need to identify these key aspects of the text that is given. The major ideas, the major concepts, they are coming from which subject area. So that would be the correct answer. So you need to remember this concept as well. Moving on to the next question. A teacher of class 6th does a warm-up activity to connect their previous knowledge and experience with the text they would read. She asks her learners to look at the illustrations of the reading text or the story before she begins to teach the text. What does she want her learners to do? So here they have described a warm-up activity to connect to learners' previous knowledge and also their experience before the teacher starts to read the text. So when she is asking her learners to do this, what is the intention that she has here? So what does she want her learners to do? First, make them understand the illustrations. So she's showing them the illustrations for them to understand the illustrations. Option 2, visualize the story through the illustrations. So for them to start visualizing the story based on the illustrations that they can see. Option 3, appreciates the illustrations. So how well the illustrations are being made or represented. So to appreciate that, she's showing it to the students. The fourth option is make predictions about the reading text. So the last option, if you see here, happens to be the right answer, to make the predictions about the reading text. This is considered as a pre-reading activity wherein the teacher does warm-up activities to initiate discussions, to make sure that the child can predict something based on the information that they have been provided. They can brainstorm various ideas. So all of these are considered important before we actually get into the reading. So these are considered as pre-reading activities and the right answer here is option 4. Moving on to the next question. A continuous record of instances of learning by the learners is known as. So this comes under evaluation, which we discussed in our sessions on the various concepts in language of CTET exam. And this is also something that you need to remember when we are discussing about continuous and comprehensive evaluation. So now let us look at the examples. Diagnostic test, portfolio, continuous comprehensive assessment, and proficiency assessment. So if you look at the 4 options, the diagnostic test, it has a different objective altogether. It will try to diagnose or identify certain characteristics, whether it is the difficulties that the learners have, their specific abilities in certain areas. These can be identified using a diagnostic test. So that will not be the correct answer here. The next one, continuous and comprehensive assessment. It is a very wide umbrella term which has various kinds of tools and techniques coming under it. So this will also be not an appropriate answer here. The fourth one, proficiency assessment. So the proficiency assessment is also a very vague term. We are not specifying what kind of proficiency or which language skill proficiency are we assessing here. So the correct answer here would be portfolio. A portfolio is basically a continuous record of instances of learning by the learners, is referred to as portfolio. So it will have various records of how the child has learned, how the child has improved, and certain key aspects which will show us the development that the child is having in his or her learning. So that is why this particular topic also becomes important. Moving on to the next question. Which of the following are known as receptive skills? So when we were discussing about the LSRW skills, we spoke about receptive skills and also productive skills. So among LSRW, two of the skills are referred to as productive skills and two of the skills are referred to as receptive skills, which means we receive information to understand and produce. In order to show that we have understood or to deliver these skills, we have to produce. That is the productive skills. So let us look at the options. Option 1, listening and reading. Option 2, listening and writing. Option 3, reading and speaking. And option 4, speaking and writing. So when we talk about receiving information or when we go through it, we are trying to understand. The correct answer here would be option 1, that is listening and reading. Let us move on to the next question. Many Indians who go abroad for jobs learn the language of the place. What is this motivation known as? So, we have discussed motivation, what role it plays and how important it is for us to be motivated in order to learn a language, especially a foreign language or a new language for that matter. So now when an Indian is going abroad and in order for them to look for a job, wants to learn the language that is spoken in that particular place. So the options in front of us, like what kind of motivation it is. Basically, we have spoken about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, but let us now look at the examples here and then see what are the options and also how and which particular motivation will be the correct answer here. So it is neither instrumental nor integrative motivation. Both integrative and instrumental motivation, integrative motivation, instrumental motivation. So they have not spoken just about the motivation aspect in terms of intrinsic and extrinsic, but they have spoken about a different terminologies, that is integrative motivation and also instrumental motivation. So when we see here, there is a reason as to why this individual wants to learn the language. There is a gain. In order to get the job, the person wants to do it. It is not for him or her to understand the culture, to be part of the community of this particular language that is spoken by a group of people. So when it is done with certain gain in mind, this particular kind of motivation is referred to as instrumental motivation. And the other kind, when you want to be part of the community and want to learn the culture and the language of the people, not for your gain, it is referred to as integrative motivation. So try to remember these two new terminologies that are coming under motivation when it comes to language learning. Let us now move on to the next question. Which of the following language is not a classical language? So in our constitution, and when we talk about various languages, there are a few languages which are listed under classical languages, and also there are various languages which have been given certain constitutional places. So this becomes important. So try to remember major languages or the classical languages when it comes to this. So here the right answer is Hindi, as the other options are Tamil, Sanskrit and Telugu. Tamil, Sanskrit and Telugu are given the status of a classical language. Hence the right answer here is option 1, Hindi. Next question is, which of the following is not true of the National Education Policy 2020 on the study of foreign language? So what has the National Education Policy spoken about foreign languages, and which of these statements is not true in that context? So let us look at the examples. French is one of the language recommended to be studied as an additional option. Option 2, study of foreign languages as an additional option during the secondary stage. Option 3, study of foreign languages including as one of the languages under the three language formula. And option 4, foreign languages does not include in the three languages studied under the three language formula. So, NEP 2020 has definitely spoken about the three language formula, but here what they are asking us is what has it spoken about foreign language, but the option that we have to tell here is what it has not spoken or it is not true when it comes to NEP's view on the foreign language. So the right answer here would be option 3. Study of foreign languages included as one of the languages under the three language formula. It is not true. Under the three language formula, they are promoting the Indian languages itself. It is not including the foreign language. Let us now look at the next question. Which of the following refers to knowing about language? So there are various kind of knowledge when it comes to knowing about the language. It can be declarative, it can be procedural, it can be grammatical, or it can be strategic competence, which we discussed in the other question. So here, just knowing about the language, knowing the rules of the language, knowing the words of the language is referred to as the declarative knowledge. When it comes to where to use it, how to use it, just knowing the what is declarative, then knowing how to use it is referred to as procedural knowledge. So now try to remember this when it comes to the next questions that we will be solving in this series. Moving on to the next question. A teacher of class 6 develops the following task for a speaking activity. So here the skill that is being addressed is speaking activity. Speak 5 sentences about desert and its climatical condition. So the instruction that the teacher has given, speak 5 sentences about desert and its climatic conditions. Is it a good task or not a good task? Select from option your response and reason for the same. So whether this activity is a good activity or not and why it is good or why it is not good, the reason also we need to select. So let us look at the 4 options here. Remember that the instruction that was provided was only speak 5 sentences about desert and its climatic condition. So the option 1 is it is not a good task because it lacks context as there is no input for speaking about desert and its condition. Option 2 is it is a good task because the learners may have studied about desert in their geography class and will have inputs to speak. Option 3, it is a good task because it makes the learner to talk about something that is the desert. Option 4, it is not a good task because some of the learners may not know about desert. So when you look at all of these 4 options, we realize that it is not a good task because there is no input that is given by the teacher. So how do we ask the student to perform a task based on the speaking skills? So the right option here would be option 1, it is not a good task because it lacks context as there is no input for speaking about desert and its conditions. Moving on to the next question. Which of the following statements is true of a dialect of a language? So this particular question in seated, and when I check the answer key also, we realize that here more than one option was true. So if you look at the statements and the options here, all are acceptable responses. So this question was not marked and grace marks were given. So let us just discuss it for our benefit. So the statements which are true of a dialect of a language, that is what we need to address. So some different social groups may speak different dialects of the same language, which is very true. Dialects of a language will vary from region to region. Speakers of different dialects of one language can understand the other dialect speaker. A dialect is a bigger category and language is a smaller category. So if they would have asked us not true, we could have selected option 4. But they are asking us which of the following statements is true of a dialect of a language. That is why this question, more than one statements are true. Now let us look at the next question. Which of the following tasks promotes integrated learning skills? So, when we are trying to talk about integrated learning skills, so we should be able to integrate various skills that are involved in language learning, which are the four basic skills of language learning: listening skills, speaking skills, reading skills, and the writing skills. So, when you look at the options, writing an article, it is addressing only the writing skill. Role play. So the students will be enacting and speaking and delivering certain dialogues. And the third one is an assignment work. And the fourth one is project work. So here, the most comprehensive option would be the project work. That is why it becomes the right answer here, because a project will involve various kind of skills. It will give opportunity to address all the four skills. So the correct answer here is option 4. Moving on to the next question. What is the following strategy in the context grammar teaching known as? So a particular strategy is being used here, and what it is called when it comes to the context grammar teaching. So now let us look at this strategy. Introducing language items in context, making learners notice the language items, enabling them to use in real life context, and drawing the attention of learner to the form by discovering it. So if you understand this particular strategy properly, you will understand that they have taken items in the context and they are trying to make the learner notice the language items, so that they're able to realize how it is being used in real life context, and then they are drawing the attention of the learners to the form by discovering it through all of this contextual meanings and the language items. So the right answer here would be option 1. Let us still look at all the options that are there in front of us. Option 1 is conscious reasoning. The second option is creating a schema. Option 3 is reductive method. And option 4 is discovery method. So the correct answer here is consciousness raising. We have already discussed what are deductive and inductive methods. So now let us look at the next question. So after we have done few of these questions, we have come across various types of questions and some of the important topics from pedagogy of languages. So if you would have opted for English as your language 1, those were the questions for you. Now, if we are referring to English as our language 2, if the preference is English being our language 2, now we will look at the other PYQs which came in the same question paper. It just differs what is your preference. So you need to attempt those questions based on the preference that you have given. If you have taken language 1 as your preference in English language, we solve those questions now. Now, if you give English as language 2 as your preference, we will look at those questions now. The questions are pattern is the same. They will give us unseen passage or unseen poem, and also questions related to language pedagogy. So now let us look at some of the questions on language pedagogy. Ashwin knows Odia from his birth. He studies English and Hindi. Based on this statement, find out which of the following statements is not true. Option 1. His English learning is language acquisition. His Odia learning is language acquisition. His Hindi learning is language learning. His English learning is language learning. So this particular question is asked from language learning and acquisition concept. So we already know that language learning is a deliberate attempt, whereas language acquisition is considered to be a natural phenomenon wherein we learn the language naturally through our surroundings or through having the exposure to the language. So Ashwin knows Odia from his birth. So he has acquired Odia language naturally. So the language acquisition has happened for Odia as a language. And he is now studying English and Hindi, which means he is learning English and Hindi language So the correct option here, we need to identify which of the statements is not true. So his English learning is language acquisition is a false statement. So the next question is instrumental motivation is when. So they are talking about instrumental motivation. A person learns the language for writing a book. A person learns the language for utilitarian reason like employment. A person learns the language for being closer to the native speakers of the language. A person learns the language for their community's religious and social function. So when we were discussing about motivation in the previous questions that we have discussed in this session, so the right answer here is option 2. A person learns the language for utilitarian reasons like employment. Then it is referred to as instrumental motivation. Now moving on to the next question. Kripa and Karan are twins and speak a particular dialect of Manipuri. However, they differ in their speech. What is their individual special way of speaking the dialect known as? So, some of the key words that we need to pinpoint or understand here is Kripa and Karan are twins. So, they are from the same family. They would have had the same exposure to language learning and their backgrounds are same. And they are speaking a particular dialect of Manipuri. So both of them are speaking the same dialect of Manipuri, but their speech differs. So this individual special way of speaking the dialect, what is it called? So let us look at the 4 options. The first option is Manipuri, which is the language itself. So we can remove that particular option. Option 2, idiolect. Option 3, dialect, and option 4, speech act. So dialect is already addressed in the question. Speech act will not be the right answer. So the correct answer here is idiolect. So it refers to the individual differences that arises in the same dialect. The same dialect can be spoken by different people in different manner. So these individual differences in a dialect is referred to as an idiolect. Let us move on to the next question. What is the status given to the English language in the Indian Constitution? So like we were discussing, there are few of the questions that come in the seated examination asking the status of various languages with respect to the Constitution and also whether they are official language, classical language. So try to remember some of these aspects. So English language status is what we are discussing in this question. Let us look at the 4 options. Language of statutory bodies, official language, associate official language, and foreign language. So the right answer here is associate official language. Let us move on to the next question. A test which aims to identify an individual student's specific areas of weakness and strength is known as a formative test, objective test, validity test, and diagnostic test. So formative test or formative assessment we have already discussed in the concept of evaluation. So the right answer here would be diagnostic test, as we are trying to identify specific areas of weakness and strength. Hence the correct answer is option 4, diagnostic test. Moving on to the next question. Aditi knows the rules of past perfect tense but cannot use in a context. What knowledge does she possess? So we were discussing that there is procedural knowledge, there is declarative knowledge. So when it comes to knowing the rules of past perfect tense that she is aware of, so she knows the rules but she is unable to apply and use it in a context. So which knowledge does she possess is what the question is here. So she has declarative knowledge but she does not possess the procedural knowledge as to how to use it in the context. So the right answer here is option 4, declarative knowledge. Moving on, which of the following is not true of a language? We have to find out the statement which is false. The options are: some languages can only convey science and engineering better. Language expresses identity. Language is a repository of history. Language contributes to the sum of human knowledge. So when we were discussing in our concepts of what is the role of language, why we need to learn language, we were discussing how acquiring knowledge is also possible through language. The transmission of knowledge is also possible through learning of language, and also the ability to preserve knowledge for the next generation or to give them the knowledge that we have, we need language. So one option which is clearly wrong is the first one, that is, some languages can only convey science and engineering better. It is not true of languages. And hence, this is the correct option here because they were asking us which of the statement is not true of language. The correct answer is option 1. Some languages can only convey science and engineering better. Moving on to the next question. What are the stages involved in designing and doing a project work in language classroom? So when we are talking about project work, what does it involve? What are the various stages that are involved in designing and doing a project work? Now let us look at the options. Teacher and learners can design and do the project work any way they want to. So is it a deliberate activity? If it is a deliberate activity, teacher and learner can design and do the project in any manner that they would like. Will this option be correct? Think about it. Let us move on to the next one. Forming groups, planning, collection of data, interpretation of data, writing the draft. So now they have given various stages that are involved. So keep this in mind and then see what the whole second option is talking about very carefully. Forming groups, planning, collection of data, interpretation of data, writing the draft, identifying the topic, and finalization of the report. The next option is forming groups, identifying the topic, planning, collection of data, interpretation of data, writing the draft, and finalization of the report. The next one, forming groups, identifying the topic, planning, collection of data, writing the draft, interpretation of data, and finalization of the report. So if you see, first option can be removed easily because it is not telling us about the various stages that are involved in designing and doing a project work in language classroom. So we are removing the first option. Now we are left with three options in front of us. In this, the first step in the sequence is forming groups. So now forming groups is the same in all the three. So we cannot use it for elimination. If you look at the last option, writing the draft is there in the second option. We have the last step as finalization of the report. And in the third option is also finalization of the report. In the fourth option also finalization of the reports. So we cannot use the first step and the last step to identify the correct sequence here. But we know that when it comes to project, the planning will be in the initial stages and not in the later stages of project work development. So the right answer here would be option 3, that is forming groups, identifying the topic, planning of the project work, collection of data, then we will interpret the data, writing the draft and finalization of the report and giving it. So that is what the stages that are involved in designing and doing a project work in a language classroom. Let us now look at the next question. The top-down approach to listening involves. So now we are specifically discussing, we discussed in the concepts that there is top-down approach and bottom-up approach also. So now let us look at the 4 options in front of us and we need to identify which involves the top-down approach. Listening to each sound, words, phrases, clauses and sentences. Option 2, paying attention to the specific details. Option 3, listening to the gist of the speech, text or the audio. And option 4, listening to overall message of the text, speech or the audio. So when we are talking about listening, so this is specifically talking about the listening skill development. So when we are using top-down approach in that, the correct answer would be listening to the overall message of the text, then to the speech or the audio. So that is what is the top-down approach. Coming to the next question. A teacher of class 7th wanted to give a writing task of writing a description of a person. She went out of the classroom and brought a hawker to the classroom with his basket. She requested him to be there for about 7 minutes and then asked her learners to work in pair and write a description of the person. What do you think the hawker in this activity is known as? So, we have a very peculiar question here. So, they are describing a particular activity that the teacher has done in the classroom. So, this is addressing which skill? This is addressing the writing skill. So, the task that the teacher has given is she wants the students to describe or write a description of a person. So, she goes out of the classroom and brings a hawker to her classroom with his basket. And then now we are asked, like the learners are told that you be here and I'll be back. And the teacher is not there and the hawker is in the classroom for 7 minutes, and then she asks her learners to work in pair and write the description of this person. And let us see what kind of activity this is and what role does the hawker play here is the question here. So the hawker in this activity is known as materials, teaching assistant, a hawker, and or else the fourth option, a participant in the activity. So clearly the right answer here is a material. So this is bringing in the context or a real life example to the classroom. So he will be considered as a teaching learning material resource to the class. Moving on to the next question. A teacher of class 7th wants her learners to read the short text with an understanding of power and identity of the people and community presented in the text. What does the teacher aim to promote among learners? Is it literary skills, language literacy, critical literacy, and analytical reading? So, when the teacher has given a particular short text and specifically there are certain pointers what the teacher is expecting. So the teacher wants the students to understand the power dynamics, power and identity of the people and the community that are presented in the text. So this is referred to as critical literacy. We have the NCF 2005, it spoke about critical pedagogy, where it talks about challenging the already existing information, trying to not accept anything and everything that is presented to you, always having a critical view on it, trying to understand the power dynamics, trying to understand the various identity and how we have instilled a lot of inequality among our textbooks, among our teaching learning process and in general in society, and how to challenge it. So we want our learners to become critical leaders, and hence the right answer here is option 3, that is critical literacy. Moving on to the next question. Which of the following is true of the study of classical language as advocated by National Education Policy 2020? So now, what is the National Education Policy talking about classical language? So which statement is true from all the options that are given to us? Option 1, study of classical language as a core language at the secondary stage. Study of classical language as an additional option during secondary stage. Study of classical language as an option under the 3 language formula, and study of classical language during the preparatory stage. So here we are specifically focusing on the secondary stage. So we can remove the option 4. So the right answer here is using or studying of classical language as an additional option during the secondary stage. We have already discussed how it is not part of the 3 language formula. Moving on to the next question. Here is a text. Read and find out which language register does the text belong to. So we have already seen one question on language register already. So now let us see what this particular question is asking and what will be the correct answer here. Suddenly, after the revolution, it seemed possible to change this. In many parts of the world, including Europe and Asia, new ideas about individual rights and who controls social power began to be discussed. In India, Raja Ram Mohan Roy and his Royo talked of the significance of the French Revolution. The developments in the colonies in turn reshaped these ideas of societal change. So, this particular text they have taken from one of the subject areas, and now let us see what are the options in front of us. Revolution register, science register, political register, and social science register. So, this is describing actually a historical event and what was happening after the revolution. So, the right answer here will be the social science register. Let us move on to the next question. Subhash, a teacher of class 8th, regrets language assessment generally does not give importance to receptive skills. What does he mean by receptive skills? So, a particular teacher, his name is Subhash, he has expressed that language assessment generally does not give importance to the receptive skills. So, we were earlier discussing what are the receptive skills in languages and also what are the productive skills in language. So, here they are asking us receptive skills. So, among the LSRW skills, which skills are receptive skills? Let us look at the options. Speaking and writing, listening and writing, speaking and reading, listening and reading. So these are the four options in front of us, and we know that receptive skills are those which we receive and then try to understand. So the right answer here is listening and reading. The productive skills will include those skills wherein we understand and then there is some amount of participation. We produce the language in order to show those skills. Now let us move on to the next question. Learner understands and applies that language works as a system. So this will be considered as which competence? Is it strategic competence? Is it communicative competence? Is it systemic competence? Or is it socio-linguistic competence? So the right answer here is systemic competence. We have already discussed in this previous year question paper session. So with this, we come to the end of our session and we have seen variety of questions that are existing in the previous year question paper patterns. So we have today solved English as a language 1 and also PYQs of English as language 2. So with this, we come to the end of our discussion. We will meet in the next session for learning more and prepare better for our CTET examination of September 2026. Thank you.